The reason for having retailers is attempting to break the black market.
There would still be people there smoking on the legislature at 420.
Hi, this is Biff Naked, and you're listening to the Reefer Madness podcast.
It's Reefer Madness, the podcast, with Trevor and Kirk.
Kirk, we're back.
Hey, Trevor, how's it going?
Good. So, I play a little bit of hockey in the winter. It's sort of what my main exercise is. But on Friday, I had a hockey game, a parents versus kids game against my son Eric, which, you know, parents versus kids are always cute. But, you know, that was back when they were 10 and, you know, came up to your waist and you know, try not to run them over while you were, you know, playing a game against them. My kid's now 17. He's taller than me. And he is far from the biggest kid on his team. You know, there's kids on his team who are 6'4". So, you know, the important part is the parents won, but only because we had some ringer. But yeah, you don't have to be careful of, you know, 17-year-old boys when you're playing hockey with them. You go out there as a parent and hope they don't run you over. And yeah, they are faster than you. They are better hockey players than you. Yeah, it was one of these, you know, interesting things. Reminded me a little bit of the last sort of parent game I played, which was against my daughter's team many years ago when they were bantam age. So, you know, 15-ish year olds. And, you know, we'll go out and play, you know, these little girls. No, the 15-year-old girls were this close to being faster than me. So, you know, it's always just kind of an interesting thing when, you know, your kids are, another sign your kids have grown up and you've gotten old. But yeah, that it was kind of, you know, kind of wrapping up of Eric's season. You know, he's graduating from high school this year, so just another one of those transitions into, I don't have little kids anymore, and fairly soon I'm not going to have kids in the house at all anymore.
Yeah, empty nest. When they come visit and they bring their own children, that's when the next stage happens.
Well, yeah, hopefully that's a few years away, but I guess you never really know on that one, do you?
You're not in control of that. I can remember one of my milestones was watching my child take my car out of the driveway at 16, and he's driving through the park to go watch a movie in Brandon. And for those that don't understand, we have Riding Mountain National Park, which is boreal forest south of us, and it's a windy, up and down, undulating road, and like in the dead of winter, it can be a very unpredictable road with wildlife and icy conditions. And, you know, 16 years old, I can drive a car, Dad. Yes, dear. Here's the keys. And he's gone for a 2-hour drive down south to see a movie and coming back. So that was a sleepless evening waiting for that car to come back. So yes, I get it. Kids, milestones in the lives of being a parent.
They are. So, did I mention I really like this podcast thing we've got? Because one of the cool parts is sometimes just random cool people just sort of reach out to you and go, hey, you know what I really like? I like your podcast and especially the name. And this random guy, Brian Rayner, sort of reached out on LinkedIn, and we had a chat on LinkedIn about this, that, and the other, and he had so much to say about, you know, cannabis in general, and that I said, well, do you want to just record this conversation? This is really interesting. I think people would really like to hear it. And so to my surprise, he said, sure, I'd love to do that. I like telling my story. So that's kind of how we got Brian. Any questions about him ahead of time, or should we sort of let Brian introduce himself?
Well, yeah, we can let him, but it's you're telling a random story, and it's interesting because this passion project does allow us to speak to interesting people. When we come out of this, and I essentially remind me to tell you the story of walking into the college and speaking to nursing students.
Sure.
I had that opportunity last week. But in talking about this story, I think this is interesting because I usually bring the human interest stories. I usually bring the My Cannabis stories. And this is a My Cannabis story of an interesting gentleman with an interesting story who discovered cannabis, goes, oh, it's medicine. It's not just something that you do to get hooped and loopy. it's actually medicine. So this is what I like the story. I think, yeah, jump right into it and let's hear him tell his story.
All right, let's listen to Brian.
Hello, and thank you for that. Thank you for that introduction, Trevor. My name is Brian Rayner. I am a former U.S. Marine combat veteran. I know a lot of folks say, once a Marine, always a Marine. Don't say former or past Marine. I still say it anyways. I don't don the uniform anymore, and the battles that I fight are not on foreign land, and not in a physical sense either. Thank goodness. So I'm a technology entrepreneur. I've spent close to 3 decades in corporate America in various roles, from doing cloud consulting for the oil and gas industry, digital marketing solutions for all kinds of different markets. Automotive did quite a good number of years there. And then in the health and fitness arena back in the 90s, and information technology. And I've serviced all different types of businesses. And as I alluded to prior to that, I was in the United States Marine Corps. I was one of those kids that if you'd have known me as a teenager, you would have been shocked like everybody else was that I actually joined the Marines. But I knew I had to get a little bit of guidance in my life. I was a college student at the time. I was studying, depending upon the semester, I studied art, I studied psychology. And before I finally threw in the towel, a typical tech entrepreneur, I dropped out of college.
I think you have to do that to be a tech entrepreneur, don't you?
You got to. I think it's like, that's definitely one of the prerequisites. So I think engineering was the thing that kind of sent me over the edge. Like, I majored in engineering one semester. I'm like, that's it. I'm joining the Marines. It's got to be easier than engineering, especially a right-brained, out-of-the-box thinker like I tend to be. So I was in college, joined the Marine Corps, and then I just want to talk about the PTSD and kind of how I got to that level, and then what cannabis did to kind of completely remedy in such a miraculous way. I can't say enough great things about it. So joined the Marine Corps. My MOS was an 0151. So I was a special screener, which meant that I tested, I think, fairly well on their IQ type of a test that they have, the ASVAB.
Okay.
And my MOS was imagery interpretation intelligence. I'm colorblind. And so the day before I graduated boot camp, they're like, well, you can't have this MOS. So why not? It sounds like a fun MOS, and I'm qualified. And they're like, well, because you got to study bomb damage assessment photographs. I'm like, I'm good. I can totally do that. And they're like, well, it says here you're colorblind. They are in color. They're not in black and white. So my MOS ended up being an 0151, which is an administrative function. So I thought, it was right after the first Gulf War. I wanted to be a Marine so bad. So I was like, okay, excellent. I will definitely do the 0151 administrative thing. And they said, hey, you know what? We'll put you at headquarters, 3rd Marine Aircraft Wing. You're going to be in California. I've always been really big into music. He asked me where I wanted to be stationed. He gave me 3 different choices. And Hawaii was one of them, but I picked California because the music scene during that, and that's just a silly reason, but I was so into the music. A lot of the music that I was into was originating out of California at that time, Korn and Tool and Rage Against the Machine. And then you had the Seattle grunge thing with Nirvana and Soundgarden, Alice in Chains. I was all about that. So I joined the Marine Corps. I get stationed out there, went to combat training, all this stuff. And within being there for a few months, we got the announcement that we're headed to Somalia. And I was like, that geography class, I'm trying to remember where Somalia, I think I've heard of it. Yeah, it's on the Horn of Africa. So I got deployed there. And it was like what you would see in the movies. It was combat. It was, as soon as we got in country, we did what's called a combat landing from a C-5. They were shooting surface-to-air missiles at the aircraft as we're coming in, shooting at the aircraft, and it was just absolute pandemonium. The funny thing about PTSD, something I've learned later, there's moments in between when we landed And we ended up going to the U.S. Embassy that absolutely I cannot remember to this day. It's completely blacked out. Yeah, I can't remember. So I have no idea what happened, but it must have been pretty interesting. So I won't go into too much of the details, Somali. It was definitely something that changed my life for good and for bad. Now much more good, but for a number of years for bad. I got out of the Marine Corps, spent a few years in, got out in the 90s. And at the time, I was definitely exhibiting strong symptoms of PTSD, but I had not been diagnosed.
I'm going to jump in just because you sound about the same vintage as me. And I was in pharmacy school in the late 90s. I don't think I ever heard the word PTSD in school. Did anybody know what you had?
They actually had, they sent me to a psychiatrist, and I was drinking really heavily. I no longer drink alcohol at all. That's another thing that cannabis has been absolutely wonderful with. People with PTSD typically should not drink alcohol. It tends to lead very strongly to alcoholism, which I certainly am. Excuse me. So they had not said those words, or, shell shock. The names have kind of changed over the years to kind of, I think, desensitize everybody to them. That's a whole other conversation. But they'd sent me to a psychiatrist, and they what some of the things that they were throwing at me just didn't make any sense. They said, well, you might potentially be bipolar. And I thought, yeah, that just doesn't sound right. I'm a pretty creative, intelligent person, but I just, that doesn't, I think I was misdiagnosed. As a matter of fact, I'm confident that was, but those words, to answer your question, those words were never used. I knew something was amiss, and I actually went to therapy after that, after getting out of the Marine Corps in the 90s. And so I started working in the technology space, consulting for a small startup software company in the health club vertical. I was drinking very, very heavily, drinking to the point of blacking out and just, not drinking as a gentleman would drink. And so all through the 90s, there was a lot of that going on, but I was still able to kind of maintain my career. I still had that Marine Corps discipline that, I had the times in which I would drink, and there were certain segmented times, and then the times in which I simply would not drink. And during those times, I did imbibe in cannabis, but not in a remedy type of fashion. I viewed it at that time as a party favor. I didn't look at it, and there was no education really. I mean, and it had been demonized so much, as you may recall, in the 90s. There's been this stigma associated with it. And I love your brand name, by the way. You guys, that's a great name. The reefer madness, kind of, the stigma that was associated with it. So I kind of latched onto that. So, well, it's a party favor, and I did imbibe in it. So fast forward a little bit. So was able to be a consultant and do all these different things, and eventually rose up into the ranks of corporate America, working for these bigger organizations, consulting for small businesses to Fortune 100 corporations, did all kinds of really cool stuff, won a bunch of awards, but something was amiss. I wasn't happy. I was doing really well financially. I should have been on cloud nine. Something just still wasn't right. And I was seeking treatment through psychiatrists. And then at one point, I was talking to a Navy SEAL friend of mine in Rochester, and he said, "It sounds like to me, buddy, like you might have PTSD. You might want to go to the VA and get evaluated. You show the symptoms." He's like, me as well. And so I did, and I went through the evaluation process, and I didn't think, I honestly didn't believe, because I had this stigma in my mind of what PTSD meant. And I thought, I saw World War II documentaries of veterans with PTSD, with shell shock, that were just completely incapacitated. And so that was the extreme end of the spectrum. And so I was in big self-denial, like that's certainly not me. I know I've got something going on, but I know that that's not it. So they went through a very thorough psychiatric evaluation, and the VA came back and said, "You are without question suffering from PTSD." And I don't remember the medications, but at the time they gave me a handful of pills, different pills, which absolutely zombified me. If that's even a word. And in my world, I can't have anything that holds me back, even though I used to drink excessively, which for many years was a crutch and I didn't realize. These were even much worse than alcohol. And alcohol probably is one of the most destructive things on the face of the planet, in my humble opinion. The pills that they gave me, and I can't remember the names of them. If you rattled some off, I'd probably recall them, but they basically made me just numb to where I couldn't think. And I definitely wasn't happy. I was not happy. I was much more miserable. I was very sedate. I couldn't function that well. It was affecting my job performance. And I thought there's got to be something else. And I was really struggling. And I tried different medications and I went back and forth and even went outside. I thought, well, it's the VA. They don't know what they're doing. I got to go see another psychiatrist that actually, can more appropriately. And it was kind of the same song and dance, so went through various psychiatrists, various different protocols. I tried all kinds of things. And then I was talking to a vet buddy of mine, and he had PTSD, and he had it. I can't really compare levels of severity, but I know that his case was pretty bad. It had been quite a few years since I'd seen him, and he seemed like he was glowing. His demeanor had changed. He seemed content. He seemed centered. And I said, dude, I got to know,
what you've been doing,
what's going on with you. He goes, don't judge me, but I'm going to tell you. He goes, I've been taking edibles daily, and it's been miraculous for me. And so he goes, I'm using it to treat my PTSD. It was recommended from some people that I know, the support group that I go to. A lot of the veterans there, they don't tell the VA about it because there's still that stigma, but when we're in closed door meetings and we're talking to each other, it's something we all unanimously agree upon. I'm like, all of you are taking this. You're all taking cannabis and it's working for all of you. He's like, yeah.
Yeah.
And so at the time I couldn't get hold of any edibles, and I was in Texas. So they certainly have their ways of going. So I got some flour. I got some, and I began smoking cannabis, and it certainly helped. The edibles, I eventually was able to get my hands on some edibles, and they just seemed to have the absolute right, especially certain strains. I tried all these different strains. I found certain strains. It seemed to work, much better for me because as you know, every strain has got so many different little nuances to it that you can find this one strain like, oh, I found it. I found the one. Blue Dream is exactly what I've been looking for.
It's amazing how different all the strains are. Yes, we're still learning about that.
Oh, so much more research needs to be done. There's, God bless you for what you do. You're doing, from my perspective, such a phenomenal service to humanity, because there's so many answers that lie dormant within those plants that we have yet to tap, and I think could be absolute lifesavers. And just with my story alone, the matter of the fact that since that time, and it's been roughly about a decade since I really identified that cannabis could be a treatment for my PTSD, and started on a regular basis using it. And then I quit drinking quite a few years ago. The fact that I can just maintain being able to just have a conversation like this, for example, being able to be involved in stressful situations and not have these triggers that make me go overboard, that make me, like go drink to excessive amounts or do like the self-destructive behavior over time. That's one of the main things I've noticed that is absent from my life these days. And I have cannabis to thank for it, is the self-destructive behavior patterns. It seems to have really null and voided those completely out of my life. It took a little while, but over the course of time, I found that by having treatise from cannabis, and also, I hope this is appropriate for me to talk about. I also periodically do psilocybin treatments as well, which I found to also be just absolutely phenomenal. It's like anything. I believe moderation is the key with anything to be successful in life. So over the course of time, the symptoms of the PTSD, for example, the extreme insomnia, the paranoia, the anxiety, the fear, even the fear of certain situations and environments, eventually those things completely went away. And I still have, there's still symptoms that pop up from time to time. Like, you can't come up behind me and surprise me. There's little nuances like that I think might stick with me for the rest of my life. But the major self-destructive patterns that were very relevant throughout my life have completely diminished. And cannabis was the only thing that I found that really did the job, that truly went after not only the symptoms, but I believe the treatments are fundamental, because the cannabis, along with, I would go to therapy sessions where I would talk about our experiences. So the cannabis combined with Gestalt therapy, being able to talk to people that had similar experiences, both of those things combined, I think is what really set me on the path to healing. And also got involved in 12-step programs along the way, which were also very beneficial and helpful. But cannabis has been an absolute miracle in my life. And now I'm a tech entrepreneur. I left corporate America. I've got my own business. And as a matter of fact, we got a digital artist, for example, that is also a cannabis inspired art kind of guy. So it's kind of cool because we're connecting with other members of the community, and they're always really cool people.
They are always really cool people, aren't they?
Absolutely.
So, Brian, this is a great story, but just so I can say I did. So we started with PTSD. We're on a handful of, we'll call it prescription medications. After you discovered cannabis, I assume the handful of prescription medications went away, and the alcohol went away. And yeah, so cannabis in sort of conjunction with therapy is, I won't say made PTSD go away, but to a low level. And you're, like you said, you're now a successful functioning member of society. Is that pretty much the thing?
Yeah, that's the sum of it. And one of the most important things is, and I was just talking to my mother down in Texas about this. She's still kind of, she's coming around. She still kind of has that old school reefer madness mentality. And she's been having insomnia. And I told her, I said, Mom, let me tell you something. The best thing you can do, start off with some little gummies, take a little bit at night, and you will sleep like a baby. My little brother passed away a few years ago. My father and my brother passed away within a month of each other.
Oh,
and
that's terrible.
Yeah, he was young, and he had quite a few issues, and God rest both of their souls. But she's still dealing with some anxiety from that. That was my younger brother, her youngest. So she's still kind of going through some real interesting problems as a result of that. And I told her, I said, listen, I know that, this has been demonized. I was just talking to her about this the other night. I said, listen, cannabis has been so miscategorized over the years. It's been so demonized. And it's, from my perspective, it's been intentional. It's a nefarious reason behind it. It's not a reason to help humanity. It's not those reasons at all as to why it's been demonized. And that's a whole other podcast. But I told her, I said, you need it. Those stigmas, you've been lied to. You've been absolutely lied to. Those stigmas you have, they're not real. That perception you have, I'm telling you, if you try some cannabis in the evenings, I can guarantee you this anxiety you're feeling, these things that are keeping you from sleeping every night will go away. I'm living perfectly. I told her, I said, you remember how I used to be? You remember how I used to be, how bad off I was. I said, Mom, I'm here to tell you, cannabis is what saved me. It saved me. It literally, I imbibe daily. In the evenings, I have my evening dose, and I sleep like a baby. I don't have any. I used to have to take sleep medications. They gave me Ambien at one point, which was, oh boy, you want to have a roller coaster ride? Try some Ambien. That stuff will. Yeah, I was sleepwalking, like not even knowing where I was going at night, crazy stuff like that. So anyways, I take none of that stuff. The only thing I think I take every day, I take a little bit of blood pressure medicine, levothyroxine. That's the only prescription medications that I take. Everything else, I believe, and I'm a firm believer that our great Creator does not make mistakes. We do. And anything that comes out of the ground, I mean, there's a reason for that. It's a benefit to us. We should embrace that. And the reason it's been demonized, from my humble perspective, is a very nefarious effort by big government and big pharma to squash the one thing that could certainly prove to be so beneficial to everybody that was not a part of their quarterly profit margins, you know. And I do believe that has a lot to do with it.
Oh, I'm sure you're right. And tell your mom it's still in production, so I don't know exactly when it'll be released, but we've got one coming up. We're interviewing a doctor who treats a lot of older people, and the title is going to be "Green is the New Gray." Older people in cannabis, and she's not the only one. It's amazing. I'm in the pharmacy. I see the majority of my patients, let's say, are in the 75-ish. So, you know, we have ones who, you know, don't want to have anything to do with it, but others who, you know, my son or my grandson said I should try this. What do you think? And, you know, they just, like you said, they just need a little hand holding, a little you know, they've got a bunch of other medical conditions, so we have to be a little bit careful. But, you know, by and large, if they start low, go slow, and, you know, keep their docs in the loop about what they're doing, it's worked really well for a lot of them.
Yeah, I always like to throw in the Willie Nelson clause, because I'm from Texas, and any of the little bit older generations that kind of demonize, I'm like, you like Willie Nelson, right? Because everybody in Texas likes Willie Nelson. Could Willie Nelson possibly be wrong about this?
That's a great line. I'm going to use that one. Thank you.
Yeah, Willie Nelson is about as cool gets. And I think in Texas, it's impossible for anybody from Texas to not like Willie Nelson. I don't think I've met one single person that had a bad thing to say about Willie Nelson in Texas. I think it's impossible.
Kirk, before we talk about Brian, I promised to remind you about you walking into a nursing college. Oh
no! let's finish. Let's wrap on Brian first.
Okay.
And then go to the nursing college. But what I found interesting about this gentleman is that he's, first of all, you met him on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And him and I have got to be almost the same age. It was just fascinating to me that, you know, he's talking about bands he really liked, and that's why he wanted to be, you know, stationed in California. Well, those are bands I liked, and, you know, listening to Gulf War I. Well, Gulf War I happened when I was like in first year university. I remember screwing up on a test because, you know, I was staying up all night watching live on TV these missiles going in. It was just
CNN.
But, you know, I was watching on TV. He eventually was there, not in Gulf War I, but you get the idea. So, yeah, to me, it was really one of the really interesting parts is him and I have got to be very close to the same age. And so I was just thinking, when he was in Somalia, I was pharmacy school.
Yeah, I know. It's interesting to put yourself in a place where you hear someone having an experience. You go, oh, well, I wasn't there. You know, I was having first world problems. You were trying to keep your head on your shoulders, literally.
Yeah.
So, but he's now into tech, and we were talking off camera about his business and what is it,
JTB Online,
and his I was saying to you, I found it interesting that his generic top level domain is .io, which is very difficult to find and means in out. So it's kind of a cool high tech link to the podcast as well.
Yeah, no, and I said it a few times there, but I'll say it again. I think, well, my take home, there's many take homes. It's a fascinating story, and I'm glad that he's, you know, come out the other side. But it's bad things happened. He muddled his way through, you know, he was still, you know, a productive member of society, but, you know, he was drinking too much and didn't like the way his life was going, and then, you know, sought counseling and sought, you know, psychiatrists and prescription meds, and none of it was really doing it. Then, you know, through a buddy, discovered cannabis. But I think and that's all good. Don't get me wrong. That's all fantastic. But it's just and then becomes a completely functional member of, it's the stoners, what are they going to do? Here is someone using cannabis daily who is a successful serial entrepreneur, who, is in the tech sector, who is creative every day. Things are going really well for someone who is using cannabis to manage one of their conditions.
Yeah, and this isn't the first time we've talked about cannabis being used for PTSD. We've got several episodes. The most prominent one, of course, is with Dr. Mike Hart on episode 42, where we get into the heart of the matter and discuss it. I've also written blog pieces on this, on how some of the research out there is talking about anandamide being your body being short low levels of anandamide, and that can be a precursor to how your body copes with post-trauma stress disorder. So these are all very interesting components of the endocannabinoid system, and how cannabis can help people who have these kind of traumatic events and help them as medicine. That's why I like this. This is a story of cannabis being used successfully once again as medicine.
Yeah, and so much so that, his mom's having some issues with, very unfortunate situations, death of her son, death of her husband, and, someone who's sort of been there, done that, says, hey, Mom, I know it might not be high on your list of things, but, think about cannabis because it worked for me. And people, that's struck a chord with me because I get asked that as a pharmacist all the time. Well, if you were they say, well, would you like to do this or like to do that? Well, patients ask me all the time, well, if you were giving it to your mother, what one would you pick? Well, this is it. If we're going to give it to his mother, he picks cannabis.
Yeah, this now segues to me reminding you about my visit to the local college. On March 1st, I posted a blog piece of Cannabis as a Partner in Healthcare Planning. And this is an example about how, I don't want to call it traditional medicine because cannabis is ultimately traditional medicine. I don't want to call it Western medicine because cannabis has been part of the Western system for many years before Prohibition hit. So what would you call regular non-cannabis prescribing medical systems? Conventional. The conventional system isn't looking to cannabis to help. I believe through these 102, 103 episodes, that cannabis can be a partner in healthcare planning, right? Cannabis helps decrease prescription costs. Cannabis helps lower polypharmacy. Cannabis helps people with PTSD to be off stronger drugs. Cannabis helps people wean off street drugs. Cannabis builds better homes, and health systems are ignoring it. So segueing to the college, I was invited to come to our local college and speak to the licensed practical nursing program students who are now in their second year about my northern clinical experiences. And I've done this a few times and it was all through COVID. Most of it was Zoom meetings. I would talk to students about working in remote communities as a registered nurse and the type of practice it is. Well, as I'm there and I'm plugging in, the students inform me that they've had this presentation online last year because they were first years last year and I presented it. So I said to them, well, we want to talk about cannabis? And they all said, yeah, let's talk about cannabis. So I looked at the instructor and said, do you mind? Let's talk about cannabis. And she said, you've got 45 minutes, have at her. So I called up our webpage, which is reefermed.ca, and I started talking about all the experiences we've had. Now, I did not go in there with a lesson plan. I do have a cannabis lesson plan that I've presented to other people, but this one I just got in there and started winging it and talking about cannabis and how it can help healthcare. And here are new students. Here are things that triggered, right? The students have yet to be taught the endocannabinoid system. So,
well, I think, as I've mentioned before, I was talking to medical students well before Christmas, and that was first question. So endo what now? And I don't blame them. I didn't learn an endocannabinoid system in school. I guess I was just surprised that they're still not learning endocannabinoid system in school.
Wasn't discovered till the early 90s. I mean, come on. My generation of healthcare practitioners, we have an excuse. But since the aughts, this should have been part of all education. This is a system that manages our homeostasis. So I got to talk to nursing students about the endocannabinoid system. I got to talk to nursing students about cannabis as an exit drug. I got to talk to them about cannabis being used to help the elderly. I got to talk about cannabis. It was so exciting, and it just made me think, I missed the classroom. I spent a lot of time in the classroom in my early career. I missed the classroom. And also, not just that, we're failing our future. We're failing our future healthcare practitioners, and we are failing communities now. That cannabis is we're still viewing cannabis through the Cannabis Act, meaning that people still view cannabis as a substance that's being misused. It's not a substance that's being misused in medicine. It is a substance that is helping people in medicine, and it's time. It's just time that the healthcare systems get their heads in the right place. You can fill in the blank what I wanted to say. I think it's time. I think it's the health time the systems do that. And for those people that are interested in my soapbox, on Reefer Med, the podcast, we have a blog window, and there are several pieces on how cannabis can help. And I think it's time we get into that. And I think in 2023, Trevor, I'm going to be starting to push that more and more. I submitted an article to the Canadian Nursing Association magazine, so maybe I'll get published through the magazine. I don't know, but I'm going to try to get the message out there through the blog and through letters to the editor and that kind of stuff.
I guess I should say I'm Trevor Schofield. I'm the pharmacist.
I'm Kirk Nyquist. I'm the registered nurse, and we are Reefer Medness, the podcast, found on all of those platforms out there. Give us a review if you like us. If you don't like us, send us an email saying how we can improve. We do this completely off script, as you might be able to tell. and basically just trying to share the concept that cannabis can help systems, it can help people, and as healthcare providers, it's interesting to have this platform.
It is. And thanks again, everybody. Until next time, have a good day.
All right, guys, that was another good one. It's Renee here back in the studio. A couple of things to clean up before we go. We always like to mention that Reefer Medness, the podcast, acknowledges that we produce our shows on Treaty 2 territory, which is the homeland of the Métis. We pay our respects to the First Nations and Métis ancestors of this land, and we reaffirm our relationships. We also end each episode with a request from our guest, and Brian had asked for a song by The Cure called A Forest, so we'll go out with that. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Like the show? Let us know. We're Reefer Medness on Instagram and Facebook, at Reefer Medness on Twitter, or head over to the website at reefermed.ca to find out what we're all about and what's coming up next.
But he's now into tech, and we were talking off camera about his business, and what is it? JTBoneline.io.
JTB Online.
JT. Oh, online. Okay, I see JTB Online. There you go.